Hi, this is Joseph with Next Gen Manual Therapeutics. And, Next Gen Manual Therapeutics, the main point of this is to make manual therapy techniques, philosophies, concepts more available, more widely not only accepted but more widely available. There's no shortage of pain in the world, but there is. I feel like there's a shortage of people who are actually recognize certain kinds of problems, be they visceral or cranial, and can do something about them. Right? There's hands-on practitioner hands-on practice has grown a lot, though folks that are really kind of keeping stride with what manual therapy manual therapeutics can actually do. There's not as many of those. So that's what this little talk. This is going to be kind of related to that, but in a different way. So last weekend was Columbus Day weekend, and so we took but we made it, my wife and I and family, we had a little getaway, and we went to St. Charles, Missouri. St. Charles, Missouri was the launch point for Lewis and Clark's voyage. Now, I found that kind of funny. It's just the way my own mind processes things. So it was Columbus Day, and it reminded me that Columbus, when he went to Isabella's court, Isabella asked her experts, her cartographers and such, if she should fund Columbus's voyage. And they said no. They drew the maps on the subject. They knew where the limits were. They knew all that there was to know on the subject and suggested no. No, there was nothing to be gained from Columbus taking a voyage and exploring what they thought they already knew, apparently. But there was a financier, there was the head accountant in the court, and he thought that he kind of pointed out to Isabella, hey, for the price of one of your galas, for the price of a small wedding, you could send Columbus on this voyage, and who knows, it's a bit of a gamble, but it could turn out to be quite profitable, quite useful for you, your reign, Spain, etc. So we know how that, right? Not only with Spanish rule, think of Spain coming to the New World, right? And certainly the proliferation of Christianity and things like this. As the old saying goes, if you don't know it, right, the Spanish brought religion and the English brought the laws. That's, just one way to think about it. But Lewis and Clark, the launch point was St. Charles. Now, I didn't know this about the area, but we were checking it out and reading a little bit about it. And it was a French settlement primarily. And they had married or kind of gotten together with there were a lot of mixed couples of, I think, Omaha natives and the French. And some of their offspring, were quite skilled in multiple languages, hunting. They knew the rivers, they knew how to navigate the area. And so some of those folks were recruited by Lewis and Clark to go on their mission. Lewis and Clark were obviously very capable individuals. They wouldn't have been chosen for that mission had they not been, but they also, as such, recognized the talent that they would need to hopefully have a successful mission. And that's kind of why I'm bringing that part in, the talent that they needed. Right? These were kind of indigenous roots. They knew how to hunt, they knew how to fish, they knew how to navigate these areas, they knew how to communicate with their neighbors, etc. You have a variety of languages. And this brings me back to the health piece. So in the 70s and 80s, as the American health system became essentially taken over by corporate interests over the 70s and 80s. And 80s, that's when all of the HMOs and PPOs and all these things came in, and it was basically the corporatization of medicine that we have now. Uh, at the same time, what I find at the same time, uh, in the late 80s, 90s, Deepak Chopra, and Andrew Weil were making waves with their books and talks on holistic and integrative medicine. And Chopra basically brought to the Western minds, to the American people, Ayurveda. Ayurveda is a 5,000-year-old system. Now that's kind of awe-inspiring in a certain way, and yet it's also kind of awe-inspiring that you bring a 5,000-year-old system and repackage it and put it out there. I too, those first couple of books I thought were very useful for me to read back in those days. And so he was really kind of had a great way. He had a great mind. I'm not that I'm saying had. I don't know that he's passed on, but I'm just thinking of that time. And he did a great job of integrating the East-West because he's a doc, and he had what was his background? I think he was an endocrinologist. So, and that hormonal system actually plays well off the chakra system. I don't want to get too much into that, but there's a, I'm sure and I don't know that he really got into it too much. He probably did. But that was his kind of claim to fame, bringing the Eastern of India, Ayurveda, to the West. Now, Andrew Weil was a different kind of practitioner. He mixed in, studied herbs, nutrition, Chinese medicine, osteopathy. By the way, osteopathy at the time. So here's, I wanted to look this up, and I didn't do it before I started recording this. But Weil connected with a man named Robert Fulford, who was really kind of a giant of osteopathy. And speaking of timelines, the osteopaths had been colonized by the American Medical Association in the late 60s. So, the AMA had been playing the barbarians at the gates for probably 5 decades before that actual takeover. So that happened around 69, 70, right? And that was probably already foreshadowing some of the corporate takeover that would happen to all private practices and private hospitals that would all kind of go away, and they would all come under one umbrella of managed care. So the interesting thing is that they're basically repackaging traditional medicines, kind of like Meriwether, etc. They found the folks that had the traditional knowledge. So these docs went back. They had their big minds. They had their great educations. They both were good. Especially Weil was a very good writer, very good communicator. Both of them are great communicators. So they were able to communicate these ideas, these old ideas, repackage them, and kind of give them the A-OK under the auspices of their doctrine, their medical doctrine. So I just wanted to kind of go over that, and then I thought it was, so this is the roots of integrative and holistic medicine. And I think it's important because as we study, osteopathy is really an American healthcare system. It has essentially traditional roots. And so now I would say probably the Europeans, Great Britain, France, are probably leading the osteopathic world at this point. And that, that's great. And Canada, you might want to throw Canada in there too. I haven't done any studies to see who in the United States, most osteopaths work as what we would call MDs, and that's really allopathic medicine. So that was my train of thought that I'd kind of lost a moment ago, is that prior to this, allopathic medicine was, it's intervention. So, and what Weil and Chopra did, almost single-handedly it seems, is they really opened up this whole traditional healthcare system and brought it under the they gave it a bigger footprint. And it didn't take long before the marketability and that whether they believed it or not, they were thought of as quacks, to be sure, back in 1988 or 1990, 1992. I got into this in 92. I started going to school, was it in 90 maybe, for this. So and kind of got exposed to osteopathic ideas probably around 94. So and I was also exposed to people like Weil and Chopra and their concepts and ideas at the time. But the part I'm referring to is the way now we'll see functional medicine. Many doctors, everyone will say they're doing holistic. Everyone says they're doing integrative, and it's kind of funny because often if you know a little bit about it, or if you know a lot about it, it becomes rather apparent that that's not what they're doing at all. They're just using it as a marketing to get people in the door, and most people don't know the difference, and they're okay with it. So the patients are okay with it because they don't know any better, and the docs are okay with it. I'll leave you to reason as to why. Anyway, that's the part that I wanted to bring out, just kind of the history of, again, kind of an old style of thinking, an older style of application. And that's where that's where some of the real core skill lies. It's not necessarily in recognizing, I don't know, some new fascia or something like that. That's all great stuff. It does help us imagine things in a more clear way. But people were getting great results with different concepts. Now, I'm not suggesting we limit, our anatomical knowledge or our histological knowledge. That's great stuff. I like to read that stuff too. And it does help with my own conceptualization. But I also recognize that people, through their perceptual apparatus, were feeling, listening to the person, interacting with the person, or can get great results. So that's what I wanted to pass along for today. A little different take, but hopefully you'll find it useful. Take care until next time. Joseph Schindel at Next Gen Manual Therapeutics.